Fantasy Football Nation, Week 2 is here, so it is time to get into my weekly starts and sits. I'm going to give you some players that I think are poised to have outstanding weeks, plus I'll give you some names that you'd probably be best suited just leaving them on the bench. We'll also get into my games of the week, some players that you should consider streaming, plus my new Overcomer of the Week. So you will not want to miss any of this, so stay tuned. Be sure to like this video, share this video on social media, and subscribe to this channel. And if you have any fantasy football questions or comments that you want answered, put it in the comment section and I will answer it, and I'll give you the best fantasy advice that I know. So, it is time to get into starts and sits. We have a lot to get into today, so we are going to jump right into it. We will start off with the starts of the week. My quarterback start of the week is Josh Allen. And I liked Josh Allen last week, and we talked to him a lot during the pre-draft process just because of the tough schedule he has down the stretch with Denver, which they don't seem to be as good of a defense as we thought they would be with Von Miller being out. We'll see if he makes a return at the end of the year. It doesn't sound like he's going to. New England's defense, they're on the front seven. There's still some question marks. So the defenses that he is playing at the end of the year aren't as scary as what we thought they would originally be. And at the beginning of the year, he has some really good matchups. We saw last week against the Jets. He had an outstanding week, 28-point game in standard leagues. This week he's going against the Miami Dolphins defense that really isn't that much better. They don't have a whole lot of pass rush. Byron Jones is still getting acclimated to the team. Xavier Howard didn't do a whole lot at all last week. He's still coming back from injury, and he was also on the COVID list, I believe. And we saw last week that quarterbacks can run on this defense. Cam Newton ran for 2 scores last week against this Dolphins defense, and we saw Josh Allen have success against the Jets on the ground last week. This is something that Josh Allen has been able to continually do since he has been in the league. I expect this to continue this week against the Dolphins defense. Like I said, that gave up 2 touchdowns last week to Cam Newton. I think Josh Allen will have a big game through the air and on the ground this week. To the running backs, I'm going to give you 2 of them. And they seem to be like obvious every week starts, but I feel like we need to confirm it. The first one especially with Miles Sanders. Of course, he is being taken late first, early second round in most leagues. And of course, he's going against the Rams defense this week. He was injured last week. The Eagles were a total debacle in the second half last week against Washington. But I believe that Sanders is still a good start. They lost Corey Littleton, the Rams did this year, so I think they're going to be a little bit more susceptible to running backs catching passes out of the backfield. Plus, if you look at the aspect that Aaron Donald, we saw the havoc that he wrecked on the Dallas Cowboys on Sunday night. He's going to really probably feast on this Eagles depleted offensive line right now. So I really like his chances because Wentz is going to be having to get that ball out quickly. I believe he would be throwing a lot of check down passes. So I do like Miles Sanders in an average matchup against the Rams, but I think he will come out and have at the very least, a low-end RB1 week. My second start for the running back position is Jonathan Taylor. And this one is kind of obvious now. Jonathan Taylor's stock has risen through the roof because of the Marlon Mack injury. And we can't say we knew because he hasn't proven anything yet, but we all kind of had the feeling at some point Jonathan Taylor was going to take over the starting role of this backfield. We didn't think it would be this soon, though, with Marlon Mack being injured. But with that offensive line, that is one of the most dominant lines in the league right now, led by Quentin Nelson and Braden Smith and Anthony Costanzo. And he's going to be getting, probably a good 20 to 25 carries per week. Phillip Rivers, I don't think is going to be chucking it as much as he did last week against Jacksonville. And the Vikings defense, they showed some susceptibility to the run the past week. Aaron Jones was able to run for a score. I think Jonathan Taylor is going to be an RB1, a low-end RB1 from this point out, which I'm thrilled because I have him in several fantasy leagues, so I'm very happy about this. Of course, nothing against Marlon Mack. Hopefully, he comes back, has a nice recovery, all of that. But from a fantasy perspective, I am thrilled because I do not like running back by committees, but I do think that Jonathan Taylor is going to have an excellent week this week and probably, if he stays healthy, for the rest of the season. Another, what would seem obvious start, but again, we're going to have to watch the medical report on him coming down this weekend, is Mike Evans. And you all that have been around the channel for a while now, you know that I was not a fan of Mike Evans coming into the 2020 season because of, his skill set just not really matching Tom Brady, being with a new quarterback in a shortened offseason. We've covered that multiple times. But I do like him this week with Chris Godwin being in the concussion protocol and having a little bit better matchup this week against Carolina when they really only have Dante Jackson. They have a couple other decent corners, but I believe Mike Evans' size will be a mismatch this week against Carolina. I think that if he is healthy, especially if Godwin is out, he's going to see an increased target share. And I just really like the matchup that he has this week against Carolina. I think Tom Brady, after the miscommunication they showed in week 1, I think he's going to be eager to try and get Mike Evans involved early on in the game. Marquise Brown is another guy that I think you should start this week, and I know there's a lot of experts that are saying to start him as well this week. Had 100 yards last week, showed a really good rapport with Lamar Jackson. I believe that chemistry is only going to build, and Houston's secondary is not that great by any means. They have Bradley Roby, who will probably be covering Marquise Brown for the most part. I think that's actually a decent matchup, but I believe this is going to be a fairly high-scoring game. There's going to be a lot of throwing involved. I believe the Texans have improved some against the run. Of course, that front seven really being led by Zach Cunningham, at least the linebacking core, he's really taken a step forward. He's going to get a big contract. So I really like Marquise Brown this week just because the target share is going to be up, and I believe when Brown is healthy, he could be one of the most dynamic receivers in fantasy football this year. At tight end, this is my last big start, my starts of the week. Of course, there's other starts, that I think are going to be good this week at the tight end position. But my start of the week at the tight end position is going to be Dallas Goedert against the Rams. We already talked about Miles Sanders. We're going to be talking about the Eagles a lot. We talked about them last week. And if you go back to the video last week, for the most part, the advice wasn't horrible, except when we got to the Eagles. Of course, I was big on starting Carson Wentz and Deshaun Jackson last week. Both of them busted out, so was not that was the bad advice from last week. But hopefully we have learned our lesson a little bit. I believe that Dallas Goedert can have a really good week because, listen to this statistic, in the last 8 games that Goedert has played, he's gotten at least 8 targets. So I know that Zach Ertz is still the tight end 1 there, technically, but Carson Wentz is throwing literally just as much to Goedert as he is Ertz, So I really like the fact that he's going to get a bigger target share. And again, gain the ball out quickly in the red zone. I do not like the matchups against the receivers this week. Of course, Jalen Ramsey will be covering the top receiver. And, there's just nothing proven there. So I believe it's going to be, for the first half of the season, it's going to be the tight ends and Miles Sanders in this offense. And that's really the only players that you can trust in this offense, probably until we get to the middle of the season. We're going to move on to the sits of the week. And yet another Philadelphia Eagle is going to show up at the quarterback position, Carson Wentz. I want to wait a little bit and see if he can become a little bit more consistent. We'll see if maybe the offensive line can get a little bit healthier. But the bad O-line, I just don't know if they're going to be able to keep Aaron Donald in check. And we saw the game that he had last week against the Cowboys offensive line. Got a lot of quarterback pressures, got home to Dak Prescott a couple times. And really, that Rams defense kept Prescott in check. I believe Prescott had like 17 fantasy points, which isn't horrible. But I think Wentz's ceiling is very capped this week. I don't see him getting past 20 points. So I think there are better options out there. I think his floor is also fairly low this week. I think there's just better options out there. Jimmy Garoppolo would probably be a better option. Kirk Cousins would probably be a better option. So I would just say avoid Carson Wentz this week. James Conner, I'm going to say sit, and we're going to get into Benny Snell in a minute as a potential player to pick up on your waiver wire if he is still available. But I'm going to avoid him. I know he practiced fully on Thursday. He seems on track to play. The injury's not as bad as the Steelers thought it could be on Monday. But I'm still going to sit him. I believe that Benny Snell really proved something. He was quicker than what he was last year. That was a big problem I had with him back in 2019. Was very slow, but he lost some weight, got quicker. I believe he's going to be more in a timeshare now with James Conner, and I believe Conner's days in Pittsburgh are almost over. I believe next year you will see a Benny Snell and Anthony McFarland 1-2 punch in the backfield. Only time will tell, but I do not trust James Conner. He's made of glass. He's not going to stay healthy. And the offensive line, was not that great at all on Monday night against the Giants defense that really was not that great. With David DeCastro not in there, the running game is not going to be excellent by any means. I believe Benny Snell is the running back that can do more with a bad offensive line. And you're talking to someone, you're listening to someone who is not a huge Snell fan. But I would say bench James Conner this week against Denver. Jordan Howard is another guy that I would almost say you need to start considering dropping. Myles Gaskin, I did not expect Gaskin to come out and be the RB1 for them, but I just can never get into the head of the Miami Dolphins coaching staff. And Brian Flores has proven to be a very good head coach thus far into his tenure. But with Jordan Howard, against the Bills defense for one, which is a horrible matchup, but right now I would not trust any of the Dolphins running backs. Their offense is still pretty atrocious right now. We'll see if they turn to Tua Tagovailoa later in the year, but for now I don't think you can trust Jordan Howard or any Miami Dolphin running back. In one of my leagues today, I actually dropped Jordan Howard. It was an 8-team league, but it had extended rosters, so it was pretty much like a 10-team league. I ended up dropping Jordan Howard just because I'm going to wait until he gets a bigger bulk of the carries. I'm not going to keep him on my roster hoping he gets a touchdown, because that's really what he is right now. He's a touchdown-dependent player if Myles Gaskin is going to be out-touching him. So I would say bench Jordan Howard, bench James Conner. At the receivers, this one's a boomer bust, but I'm going to say bench DJ Chark. I was very disappointed last week in his target share. He saved fantasy football owners with a touchdown that he had last week, bringing a decent fantasy performance. Not great, but he saved it from being a huge stinker of a week. But DJ Chark is a guy that I'm a little bit hesitant right now just because Keelan Cole, Laviska Shenault, who had a really nice role, and I do like Shenault, they got more targets than what I thought they would. I thought DJ Chark was going to get 10 targets. Minshew didn't throw the ball a whole lot. They ran the ball more than I thought with James Robinson. I just am a little bit hesitant about DJ Chark this week. If you have better options, like maybe a sleeper that I'll get into in a minute, I would consider starting one of those, so you have to stay tuned for that. But I'm just a little bit hesitant on DJ Chark right now. Titans isn't exactly a great matchup anyways, so I would say avoid Chark this week. I know there's some other fantasy experts that are saying he's a good play this week, but I'm a little bit more hesitant on him. The other receiver that I'm going to say to sit is DK Metcalf. And he had a really nice game last week. I put him on the bench in a couple leagues in place for DJ Moore. That did not work out for me. But I do think that DK Metcalf should be benched this week. J.C. Jackson and Stephon Gilmore are probably the best cornerback duo in the entire league right now. So I would avoid any wide receiver that is playing the New England Patriots right now. He'll probably be lined up against J.C. Jackson when Lockett lines up on the outside. But, of course, when Lockett's in the slot, he's going to be going against Gilmore. It really doesn't matter at this point. I don't think either of them are good matchups in the favor of Metcalf. So I would say avoid the Seahawks passing game for the most part. If you're going to play someone, play Lockett. Metcalf, of course, he always has that chance to go off for 150 yards and 2 touchdowns. But I find it very unlikely this week against New England. At tight end, my sit is going to be Hayden Hurst, and I believe he was my sit last week as well. Didn't have a great game last week. I don't think he has a great game this week against the Dallas Cowboys either. They held Tyler Higbee in check last week. It's not an excellent matchup, and Hayden Hurst still getting acclimated into the offense. Hasn't developed a chemistry with Matt Ryan. He's getting dropped in a lot of leagues. I'm noticing that he's on the waiver wire in several leagues that I'm in. And rightfully so. I'm just not ready to jump on the Hayden Hurst bandwagon yet. So there's your starts and sits of the week. Of course, if you have players that you're not sure whether to start or sit, put in the comment section. I'll give you my advice. But those are my big starts, my big sits. Now we're going to move to the sleepers. And I have 5 sleepers that I'm going to give to you. 2 receivers, 2 receivers, 1 running back, 1 quarterback, and 1 tight end this week. We'll start off with quarterback, and that is Mitch Trubisky. He had an excellent week last week. It didn't start off that way, but he came alive in the fourth quarter. I hope for his sake that will build up some confidence. Of course, when he has been a confident quarterback, he hasn't been bad. Go back 2 years ago when he was actually a very good fantasy option. I like him this week against the Giants. Their secondary is completely depleted. We saw Ben Roethlisberger coming back from injury. I didn't expect a whole lot, and he had a really nice game. So I actually like Mitch Trubisky this week as a sleeper. If you're in 2 QB leagues, I think you can afford to pick him up, start him over guys maybe like a Drew Lock or Daniel Jones. I think that Trubisky has a decent chance to reach 20 points this week. His teammate at wide receiver is a guy that I think is another sleeper. I had him on my sleeper list last week, and he had a decent week. Anthony Miller. I believe both he and Allen Robinson could have really good weeks. And you're finding all the Bears players on the sleeper list right now. I just don't have enough confidence in them to move them to the stardom list. But I do believe that Anthony Miller, if you are really thin at wide receiver, he can be a really good flex option for you this week. And another receiver that I had on the sleeper list last week was Alan Lazard. Both he and Marquise Brown went off last week. I like both of the receivers, actually, but from a fantasy perspective, I have to give Lazard the edge just because Scantling is so dependent on those 50-yard bombs, and those are not going to happen every week. So I do like Allen Lazard this week against the Lions defense that's still finding its way. Jeff Okudah being a rookie, Desmond Trufant, they had a couple of injuries, couple nicks in the secondary. So I would say Allen Lazard would be a decent play again as a flex option if you're thin at wide receiver. My one running back that I think is a decent start is Alexander Mattison. Not as a flex option. I think his upside is limited, of course, because Dalvin Cook is there. But he actually had a really decent game last week against the Packers, who are supposed to have a decent run defense, and that was with a limited amount of carries. I believe he is still going to have a role in this offense. I think the Vikings have made that very clear with the way that they used him last week, and the Colts are an easier matchup than what the Packers would be. So I think he could be a low-end running back 2. I would probably lean more running back 3, so as a flex option, I think he could get you a decent amount of points for this week. My final sleeper of the week is Jordan Reed. Finally, we're talking about Jordan Reed again in fantasy football. I loved him several years ago. Of course, the nagging injuries, but of course, San Francisco signed him, for those of you that didn't know that. He is with the New York Jets now. With San Francisco, going against the New York Jets. Now I'm getting a little bit confused here. But George Kittle, of course, he got injured in week 1. Monitor his status. If he has any sort of limitations, I think Jordan Reed could be a good tight end 2 this week. Again, probably extended leagues. You probably don't want to trust him because there's so much unknown with Jordan Reed. But with Deebo Samuel not being there, Jimmy Garoppolo has to throw to someone, and I think Jordan Reed could have a really big week if George Kittle is out, and I still think he could have a solid week if George Kittle is limited. So monitor Kittle's status, and Jordan Reed is a true sleeper in week 2. This week, I'm going to get into a couple different things. We're going to start off with some streamers, some guys that you should consider streaming off the waiver wire. I'm going to give you 4 quick names. We mentioned Benny Snell already, so I'm not going to get into him. He's being picked up in a lot of leagues. Frank Gore, that one's a little bit tougher. This is if you're really, really thin at running back. Bell's probably only going to be out a few weeks. I don't really trust anyone in the backfield when Le'Veon Bell is there because Adam Gase refuses to give him the full workload, and Frank Gore, he's just, he's 37 years old or whatever now. He's still a very decent running back, but they're going to be trailing in most games, I figure, so his upside is limited. But while Bell is out, if you need someone desperately for the next couple weeks, Frank Gore is someone that you could consider turning to. Adrian Peterson, I guess, would be another name as well. But then at receiver, of course, the 2 guys we mentioned in the sleepers already, Anthony Miller and Allen Lazard. If they are in your, on the waiver wire in your league, and you have either an injury at the receiver position, or you have a guy you just don't feel confident in, didn't do anything in week 1, I'd consider picking up one of those guys and dropping the other player, whatever that player may be. I'm going to give you one trade target this week as well. I'm going to give you one trade target that you should consider going after. I know it's a little bit early, but we're going to get into one player you should target. One player that if you have this player, maybe you should start shopping him. The player that I think you should target is Leonard Fournette. And I was not high on him when he was with Jacksonville. I'm still not terribly high on him, but I believe his role is going to increase with this Buccaneers offense. If there's someone that, is an overreactor in your league after 1 week and stuff, go after those players and stuff that have bad week ones. Trade them for a player that's not going to sustain maybe a really fantastic week one that they had. Try to manipulate those trades. Week 1, week 2 are the best times to get absolute steals on trades. And I've done that a lot in many of my leagues before, and it's paid off. It's really helped me get to the playoffs before. So I think Leonard Fournette, if you can get him in the next 1 to 2 weeks, I believe you can get really good value on him because his stock is only going to rise throughout the year. I don't believe the coaching staff is sold on Ronald Jones. If they were, they wouldn't have traded for Fournette. The player that I think you should consider trading away if you have him is Fournette's former teammate, DJ Chark. I already told you guys to sit him this week. I have him in a couple of my leagues. I didn't really plan on drafting him, but he was too good a value. He kept on dropping. And maybe I'm overreacting here, but at the end of the year, his schedule's not fantastic. And I am a little bit worried about that target share. I thought it was going to be bigger. I thought he was going to explode week 1 against an easy matchup against the Indianapolis Colts. That did not happen. They ran the ball with James Robinson, which I did not see happening. But I would say if you have DJ Chark, see what you can get for him. Doesn't mean trade him, but at least throw the name out there to your league. See if there's anyone that was high on him at draft time. They didn't draft him. Maybe they're still willing to give you something really good for him. This is the new thing, and I'm going to do this every week. I'm going to give you a fantasy overcomer of the week. And this is going to be a player that has a tough matchup, but is still going to overcome it and have you a really nice week. And my fantasy overcomer for the week is going to be Noah Fant going against the Steelers defense. The Steelers, you think, you got to bench whoever you're going against. Well, the Steelers, the one weakness they've had the past couple years, even since the defense has started to improve, has been the tight end position. Vince Williams was lagging behind when he was in coverage against both the running backs and Evan Ingram. Terrell Edmonds seemed a little bit slow in that second half. And Devin Bush, he is still learning his way in coverage and learning how to cover, and a lot of cover 3. Steelers play a little bit more cover 3 than what I like. But that also opens holes up for the tight end. With Cortland Sutton, we'll see what his injury status is come game time. But if he is out, Noah Fant's going to see an increased target share. And I believe that Noah Fant could be a real mismatch for this Steelers defense. All right, it is time to get into my games of the week. Last week did not go good. Okay, I went 0-3. Okay, I have to get some better games this week. I picked the Vikings. I picked the Giants. Why did I ever do that? I picked the Cowgirls. You can never depend on them. All right, I've got to get some games right this week. So I'm going to go with, the 3 I'm going to keep an eye on this week. My first game of the week is going to be the Baltimore Ravens and the Houston Texans. I have the Ratbirds winning that one 34-24. I think that, the Ravens, we saw what they were. I don't think it was the Browns being that bad in week 1. It was just the Ravens were that good, and they still haven't been able to. Defenses doesn't look like they've been able to figure out how to stop Lamar Jackson yet, and the Texans defense isn't that great. So I believe that the Ravens will come out victorious in that game. The next one, Sunday Night Football, the Seahawks and Patriots, a Super Bowl rematch. I still have bad memories in that head of that Malcolm Butler interception, but I digress. Let's move on from that. That was not a good game for me. It was for Kaliba King and all the other Patriot fans that watch the channel. But I have the Seattle Seahawks winning 24-17. I want to see Cam Newton being able to throw the ball. I don't think he's going to be able to sustain, I don't know if it was 19 carries that he had last week or something. It was something ridiculous. And it may work for a little bit, but I believe that they will not be able to run as easily against the Seahawks than what they were week 1 against the Miami Dolphins. I believe the Seahawks will win 24-17. Still not sold on the Patriots' ability to stop the run, even though they did so in week 1. Chris Carson, we'll see what kind of game he has, but I still like the Seahawks. Russell Wilson, I trust him more than Cam Newton at this point. And then my final game of the week is the Saints and the Raiders. I have the Saints on the 50th anniversary of Monday Night Football defeating the Las Vegas Raiders 34-20. We saw them last week beat Tampa Bay. This should be a fairly easy matchup for New Orleans. but you never know. We'll see Henry Ruggs had a decent game. We'll see if Bryan Edwards can get involved in the passing game. Foster Moreau and Darren Waller, they have some weapons there that I believe Derek Carr can take advantage of against the Saints defense. But for now, I think that this is a game the Saints should be able to win. That is going to do it all for today. Again, put those comments in the comment section. If you have any fantasy questions, put it in the comment section. I will answer it as soon as possible. And do not forget to like this video, share this video on social media, and subscribe to this channel. You can get notifications every time that a new fantasy football video is out, so you do not miss anything in order so that you can win your fantasy football leagues this year. That's going to do it all for today. Until next time, I am Andrew Wilbar. We will see you later. Have a good night.